Aurora's dawn. The sun hung low over the rugged hills of Oregon's Cascade Range, casting long shadows across the forest floor. Isla trudged along the familiar hiking trail, her boots crunching on the dry earth. She had walked this path countless times since moving to the small town of Pine Ridge after her husband's death. The solitude of the national park had become her refuge, a place to escape the weight of grief that clung to her like a shadow. But today something felt different. The air was thick with an eerie stillness, broken only by the faint rustling of leaves. As she rounded a bend, a soft sound reached her ears, a weak, barely audible whimper. Isla froze, her heart skipping a beat. She scanned the surroundings, her eyes darting between the trees and the underbrush. There, just off the trail, she saw it, a small mound of freshly turned earth, and protruding from it, the head of a dog. Isla's breath caught in her throat. The dog's eyes were half closed, its fur matted with dirt, and its tongue lolled out, dry and cracked. It was a German shepherd, its once powerful body trapped beneath the weight of the soil. Only its head remained above ground, barely clinging to life. "Oh my God," Isla whispered, dropping to her knees beside the shallow grave. Her hands trembled as she reached out, brushing away the loose dirt from the dog's face. The animal's eyes flickered open, dull and filled with pain, but there was a spark of life in them still. Isla's mind raced. Who could have done this? The thought made her stomach churn with anger and disbelief. But there was no time for questions. The dog was dying, and every second counted. With a surge of determination, Isla began to dig. Her fingers clawed at the earth, breaking through the hard-packed soil. It was slow, agonizing work, and her nails split and bled. But she didn't stop. The dog's shallow breath spurred her on. "Hold on, girl," she murmured, her voice thick with emotion. "I've got you." After what felt like an eternity, Isla freed the dog's shoulders. The German shepherd let out a faint whimper, its body trembling as it tried to move. Isla's heart ached at the sight. How long has she been here, she wondered, but she pushed the thought aside. There would be time for answers later. Finally, with one last heave, Isla pulled the dog free from its earthen prison. The animal collapsed into her arms, its body limp and skeletal. Isla cradled it gently, feeling the sharp edges of its ribs beneath her fingers. Tears stung her eyes as she whispered, "You're safe now." But the dog wasn't safe yet. Its breathing was labored, and its eyes fluttered shut. Isla knew she had to act fast. She lifted the dog, surprisingly light for its size, and carried it back down the trail to her car. Every step felt like a race against time. The drive to the veterinary clinic in Pine Ridge was a blur. Isla kept one hand on the steering wheel and the other resting on the dog's head, murmuring words of comfort. "Stay with me, girl. We're almost there." When she burst through the clinic doors, the receptionist's eyes widened in shock. "Help! Please, she's dying!" Isla cried, her voice breaking. Dr. Martin, the town's only veterinarian, appeared almost immediately. He took one look at the dog and ushered Isla into the examination room. "Lay her on the table," he instructed, his voice calm but urgent. Isla watched, her heart pounding, as Dr. Martin worked. He attached an IV line, administered fluids, and checked the dog's vital signs. The room was silent except for the soft beeping of machines and the occasional murmur from the vet. After what felt like hours, Dr. Martin finally spoke. "She's severely dehydrated and malnourished. It's a miracle she's still alive." He paused, his expression grim. But she's not out of the woods yet. The next 24 hours are critical. Isla nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. Can I stay with her? Dr. Martin hesitated, then nodded. It might help. She needs all the support she can get. Isla pulled a chair close to the examination table and sat down, her hand resting on the dog's paw. The German shepherd's eyes were closed, but its chest rose and fell with shallow breaths. Isla leaned forward, her voice barely a whisper. You're not alone anymore. I'm here. The betrayal Aurora had always been loyal. From the moment she was brought home as a puppy, she had loved her owner with every fiber of her being. She didn't understand why he yelled or why his hands sometimes struck her, but she forgave him every time. She was a good dog. She always tried to be. But one night, everything changed. Her owner came home reeking of alcohol, his eyes wild with anger. Aurora cowered in the corner, sensing the storm brewing inside him. He grabbed her collar roughly, dragging her outside. She whimpered, confused and afraid. He led her to a secluded spot in the national park, a place where no one would hear her cries. There he began to dig. Aurora watched, her tail tucked between her legs, as the hole grew deeper. When it was ready, he shoved her into it, ignoring her desperate struggles. The first shovelful of dirt hit her back, and panic seized her. She tried to climb out, but the walls were too steep, and her owner's boot pushed her down. More dirt rained down, covering her legs, her body, her neck. She fought to keep her head above the surface, her lungs burning as the weight pressed down on her. Finally, the digging stopped. Her owner stood over her, his face twisted with something she couldn't comprehend. Then he turned and walked away, leaving her to die. But Aurora didn't die. She clung to life, her will to survive stronger than the cruelty that had buried her. She waited, hoping against hope that someone would find her. Recovery at the clinic. Isla hadn't left the clinic in 2 days. She had called in sick to work, unable to tear herself away from the dog she had named Aurora, a name that meant dawn, a new beginning. It felt fitting for a creature that had emerged from the darkness. Aurora's condition was still precarious. She had developed an infection from the dirt that had seeped into her wounds, and her temperature had spiked dangerously high. Dr. Martin had administered antibiotics, but it was a waiting game now. Isla sat by Aurora's side, her fingers tracing gentle patterns on the dog's paw. "You're a fighter, aren't you?" she whispered. "You didn't give up out there, and I won't give up on you." As if in response, Aurora's eyes fluttered open. They were still clouded with pain, but there was a flicker of recognition in them. Isla's heart leaped. "Hey, girl," she said softly. "You're awake." Aurora's tail gave the faintest twitch, and Isla felt a surge of hope. It was small, but it was something. Over the next few days, Aurora's strength slowly returned. She began to eat small amounts of soft food, and her eyes grew brighter with each passing hour. Isla was there for every milestone, celebrating each tiny victory as if it were a miracle. One evening, as Isla sat reading a book aloud to pass the time, she felt a nudge against her hand. She looked down to see Aurora lifting her head, her nose brushing against Isla's fingers. Tears welled in Isla's eyes. "You're going to be okay," she choked out. "You're going to make it." A new home. A week later, Dr. Martin deemed Aurora strong enough to leave the clinic. Isla had already made up her mind to adopt her. She couldn't imagine life without the brave dog who had fought so hard to survive. The drive home was quiet, but this time, Aurora sat up in the passenger seat, her head resting on the window ledge as she watched the world go by. Isla glanced over at her, smiling. "Welcome to your new life, Aurora." Isla's small cottage on the outskirts of Pine Ridge was cozy and welcoming. She had prepared a soft bed for Aurora by the fireplace, and as soon as they entered, the dog sniffed around cautiously before settling into her new spot with a contented sigh. The first few days were an adjustment. Aurora was still weak, and she startled easily at loud noises. But Isla was patient, giving her space and time to heal. She spent hours sitting with Aurora, talking to her in soothing tones, and gradually the dog began to trust her. One morning, as Isla sipped her coffee on the porch, Aurora padded outside and lay down beside her, resting her head on Isla's knee. Isla stroked her fur, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. For the first time since her husband's death, she didn't feel alone. Healing together. As the weeks passed, Aurora grew stronger. Her once dull coat became glossy, and her eyes sparkled with life. She followed Isla everywhere, her loyalty unwavering. And in return, Isla found herself opening up to the world again. She started taking Aurora on walks through the town, and soon they became a familiar sight. Neighbors who had once kept their distance began to stop and chat, drawn in by Aurora's gentle nature. Isla even reconnected with old friends, her heart lighter than it had been in months. But it wasn't just Isla who was healing. Aurora, too, was learning to trust again. She no longer flinched at sudden movements, and her tail wagged freely whenever Isla entered the room. The bond between them was unbreakable, forged in the crucible of survival and compassion. One crisp autumn evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Isla and Aurora sat together on the porch, watching the sky turn shades of pink and gold. Isla wrapped her arm around Aurora, pulling her close. "You saved me as much as I saved you," she murmured. Aurora nuzzled her hand, her eyes closing in contentment. She was home, and she was loved. Months later, Isla stood before a small crowd at the Pine Ridge Community Center. Aurora sat obediently at her side, her ears perked up as Isla spoke. "And that's why we're here today," Isla said, her voice steady, "to raise awareness about animal cruelty and to celebrate the resilience of survivors like Aurora." The audience applauded, and Isla smiled, her hand resting on Aurora's head. Together, they had started a local initiative to support animal rescue efforts, inspired by Aurora's incredible story. It was a small step, but it was a start. As they left the stage, a young girl approached, her eyes wide with admiration. "Can I pet her?" she asked shyly. Isla nodded, and Aurora wagged her tail as the girl stroked her fur. "She's a hero," the girl whispered. Isla's heart swelled with pride. "Yes, she is." And as they walked home that night, side by side, Isla knew that their journey was far from over. But whatever the future held, they would face it together. Two souls who had found light in the darkest of places. If Aurora's story touched your heart, help us share more tales of survival and second chances. Like, subscribe, and spread the word, because every story deserves a happy ending.